Hey guys, welcome to Crater Mania. I'm your host, Crater. Um, thanks for you guys being here. First of all, I guess, and sorry if I seem a little bit off put, but I'm really exhausted from today. Um, as if you watched any of my earlier streams from the past week, you may know that Kentucky, southeastern Kentucky, especially, got hit by some really bad floods. Um, and my mother-in-law in particular, uh, her home was hit by these floods, and she ended up losing pretty much everything in her home. Um, and today is, like I said, has been an exhausting day because we've been working about all day, uh, cleaning out her home, just seeing what could be salvaged, seeing what could be um, I guess thrown away, or that it's not useful anymore. Um, so yeah, it's been a really tough day. In many ways, both just doing the work and just having to deal with just the I don't know, just the sadness of just having to deal with cleaning up, your mother-in-law's home. It takes a toll on you, and just to see. But thankfully, the thing that matters most is she's okay. She's staying with us right now, um, and but even though it has been an exhausting day, um, I'm still here putting in the work here on the channel for you guys. I watched some really badass movies this past week. That's why I'm having this badass cinema show here on February 23rd, 2025. Several of these movies I had seen before. Um, and one I think just one out of the six that I'm gonna be covering tonight is a movie I had not seen before, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And before I begin, I guess I also wanted to tell you guys some news regarding the channel. Um, so tomorrow I'll be starting a new series for the channel called Crater Time, kind of like Vader time from wrestling. So what this will be is actually my wrestling series where I'll just be talking about everything wrestling, and not just WWE, but everything, guys. AEW, New Japan, the old stuff, WWF Attitude Era, WCW, ECW, just really whatever the hell I want to talk about when it comes to wrestling, because that's just like movies, that's a big passion for me too, is wrestling. So it's equally as important to me. But that will be after Monday Night Raw tomorrow on Netflix. Once the show ends, shortly after that, I'll be starting the first episode of Crater Time. So if you're a wrestling fan, be sure to check that out. Um, but let's go ahead and jump into the show tonight, Badass Cinema. So, like I said, several of these movies just is the epitome of badass to me when it comes to movies. And these, there's a lot of badass movies out there. So these are not just like movies that I think are the most badass, but they're just random movies that I do find badass. And so I'm not ranking anything if that's what you're asking for. But no, let's go ahead and let's jump into this. I guess. So the first movie that I watched this week was Taxi Driver, from 1976, Martin Scorsese's classic, Robert De Niro classic. Um, and this is probably my favorite Robert De Niro film that's out there. I don't know. I had to think about it. I'm a big fan of De Niro. I mean, like Raging Bull. I like I like the Meet the Parents movies. I really do. I love him in that. I think he was great in like Godsend. Um, and just a ton of stuff. Robert De Niro's he's a legend. But Taxi Driver, and this is a movie. It was, like I said, it was released in '76, and it's really more than just a film. I think this is a highly like an important part of like cinema history, but it's more than just a film to me. It's just this visceral and like unsettling exploration of like urban alienation. Like, people in society getting alienated, and then also about a guy who has this like psychological decay. He's like there's kind of he's because he's a what do you call that in the movie? He's an insomniac. So like when you're an and I've never been like a full-fledged insomniac, but I've had moments in my life where I felt like I had insomnia because I was staying up all night and just I couldn't sleep and stuff. Um, so yeah, it takes a, mental toll on you for sure. Um, and this is also just a search for like meaning, I guess, in this world. But anyway, this movie, it was directed by the legendary Martin Scorsese, um, and the screenplay I think, was written by Paul Schrader, I think. And so the movie, it just remains, like I said, it's like a touchstone of American cinema. I think it's one of the greatest films ever made. Um, and it's sparked a lot of debate too over the years. Um, because there is some bit of controversial stuff in it, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But the movie just itself, it plunges us into this like neon drenched, grimy underbelly of the 1970s New York City. So, and I've never in there's a lot of movies that I love that where the setting is New York City, and I've never been to New York City, but I would love to visit it one day just because, like, you know, because of my obsession with movies, um, and seeing these settings in New York City or like other big cities like Las Vegas. I would love to visit Las Vegas as well. I just love seeing, all the different sites and scenery that's featured in those big cities like that in movies. So, um, I would love to see that for myself one day. Um, but like I said, it takes place in like the grimy underbelly, like I said, of 1970s New York City, and we're seeing everything that's happening through the eyes of Travis Bickle, who is played by Robert De Niro, and he's this Vietnam War veteran who's suffering from insomnia, um, and you know he's haunted by like all of these different horrors, I guess you could call it, like um, that he's witnessed throughout the night as a taxi cab driver, and um, he's at the same time he's struggling to readjust to like civilian life. So like I said, he takes on this job as a taxi driver because he was a Vietnam War veteran, so he still kind of is dealing with a lot of issues from all that. Um, but so he takes on this job as a taxi driver, where he's just driving throughout the late nights on the streets, and he's observing all this crime, and there's like prostitution and just a lot of bad shit going on, late at night in the town and of New York City. um so he becomes like, of all the things that he sees in and while he's on the job at night and stuff, he kind of becomes disgusted, and very irritated about with the stuff that he's witnessing, and um so he has like this desperation to cleanse the city pretty much, um which ultimately leads him down this whole like path of violence. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the characters. So, like I said, Travis Bickle. I mean, with pretty much straightforward there. You know, we just gave a description of him. His, he's just this disturbed, alienated, Vietnam War veteran, and he's a insomniac, and he's lonely, and just all of these things are a very bad combination for him for his descent into madness, if you will. Um, and his performance in this is De Niro's performance is iconic. It is absolutely iconic. Like I said, this may be my favorite De Niro film that he's ever done. It's probably definitely my favorite role of his. Um, and then you got the love interest that he finds in this movie in the beginnings of the movie, played by Sybil Shepherd. Her character's name is Betsy, and she's just like she's really sophisticated. She's this campaign worker for the senator, Charles Palantine, and who he's running for president, and so Betsy kind of represents this whole sliver of hope, I guess, for connection, because like I said, he's a very like lonely guy, and he's trying to find somebody to you know that he can have this connection with, but he's he gets rejected by her. I mean, like he takes her to like a movie, but it ends up being like a porno movie, and she gets really uncomfortable over it and everything. So her rejection of him kind of triggers his furthering spiral into isolation and anger. Um, and then we have Iris, who was played by a young Jodie Foster. I believe she was 12 years old when she did this movie, and her character in this is what has really sparked a lot of controversy. Well, both her and like the involvement of Harvey Keitel's character Sport, which is Iris's pimp. But yeah, but let's go ahead and talk about Iris first. So, like I said, she's this 12-year-old girl. She's a prostitute in the streets of New York City. Um, her pimp, his name is Sport. He's played by Harvey Keitel. Um, so when she meets Travis, you know, she's trying to just do things because that's what she knows. Unfortunately, I mean, it's very sad that that's what she knows is she wants to go ahead and do sexual things with him, but he's not. He doesn't want that. He just had her there because he was lonely and he just wanted to talk to someone. That's very. I mean, that's really sad. Um, that could possibly really happen to someone out there. I mean, I don't know anybody personally that's been like that, to where they found they were so lonely, they just wanted someone to talk to, so they have to hire a prostitute. But it makes it even wilder, knowing her age in this. Um, but then there's the scenes, like I said, with Harvey Keitel, who plays Sport, her pimp, and they're when he's like kissing her and stuff. And I mean, as much as I love this movie, to this day, whenever I watch Taxi Driver, those scenes between Jodie Foster and Harvey Keitel are very uncomfortable for me. Um, and I've never really listened. I don't know if there's anything out there. I may need to look for it, but I've never heard Harvey Keitel like talk about it. Um, so I'm kind of curious as what how he feels about it. I'm curious what Jodie Foster feels about it. Knowing how old she was at the time. Um, but um, but with her character, Travis, he becomes obsessed with rescuing her from that situation, and he views her as this symbol, I guess, of like the corruption in the city. So And like I said, with Sport, was just Harvey Keitel's character is pretty straightforward. He's just Iris's pimp. He's very manipulative of her, um, and he just kind of represents that whole dark underbelly, of the city's sex trade, if you want to call it whatever you want to call it. Um, and he becomes this significant obstacle as well to Travis's mission, to where he's trying to clean up the city, um, in the most violent ways that he can think of. And that makes me think of, before I go any further, it makes me think of the scene in the movie. And it's so different. I've never really seen any other scene like this, because it just felt like a real life moment. Nothing that really like you would see that they would put in the movie, but like it's where he's in the room with the gun salesman, and he's just telling him about all the guns and everything. And um it just, I mean, and that's, to me, that's a very important part to the movie. And to where he's like he's choosing his weapons of violence in that moment. And I think a lot of movies would just leave that out, because you just give a character a gun. It don't matter how they got it. You don't have to see how they got it. I think that's what matters. But I love that Scorsese put that scene in the movie, to where he is like, having to make a choice of like how he's going to get, what guns he's going to get, and then how he like sets it up. Then he continues on into the scene where he's like practicing his moments in the mirror and everything, and like how he's got like the whole thing geared up like MacGyver or something, where the gun like pops up in from inside his sleeve to his hand. Like, I love it. It's fucking awesome. Um, but moving on, like another character I wanted to speak of, which I kind of briefly mentioned it, but Senator Charles Palantine, who's played by Leonard Harris in this. He's a presidential candidate who's this like clean cut image. It contrasts sharply with the whole city's like degradation. It's um, and Travis really likes him at first. He almost kind of sees him as this like potential savior of the city. But ultimately, that whole vision becomes disillusioned, and Travis is like, this guy's got to go, or whatever. So Taxi Driver, it grapples, I think, with a number of just profound and kind of unsettling things. Like I said, being alienated, and being lonely. Travis, his inability to connect with others, and his just profound sense of isolation are I think central to this movie. Um, he's kind of a lost soul that's just that's drifting along in um, this urban landscape of New York City, I guess. Um, and the movie also, focuses a lot on corruption as well. Like this, it shows this city that is just drenched in crime and prostitution, uh, you know, and all that bad shit that goes on in the world. Um, it's all present there in New York City in the 1970s. And Travis he just wants to clean this shit up. He's like, I'm tired of this. And that reminded me of something as I was watching this, like looking at the Travis Bickle character. I don't know how many people watching are familiar with the straight edge lifestyle, but but his whole morals that he creates for himself almost kind of feels similar to the straight edge lifestyle. To where they want straight edge people want to keep this clean image of themselves, where they no drugs, no drinking, no promiscuous sex, all that stuff. Um, so it almost feels like this movie was a inspiration for the straight edge lifestyle. Maybe I'm just thinking too much on that. I don't know. Um, But anyway, uh, Travis also seeks, redemption for his character through violence in this, like as I've stated many times already. But and he believes it's the only way to is to purify this city is with violence. Um, but the movie does kind of raise questions about you know the justification and the consequences of these actions. So and then, also got Travis's mental state, because of, him being in Vietnam and just everything. And it's, he has some issues that definitely that are obvious. Um, and I think that's a key factor in why he makes these decisions to do what he does. Um, and I think that the movie kind of alludes to this whole struggle, like this real life struggle with veterans that when they're readjusting to civilian life, and that's featured in a lot of movies. It's same thing with like John Rambo in First Blood. He was a war veteran, and he comes back and he's just kind of like, still having these flashbacks, and he's trying to readjust to civilian life. So I really like stuff like that in movies. Um, but yeah, like I said earlier, this movie also kind of has a search for purpose and meaning in life, where because he's where he that's why he tries to latch, I think, on to Betsy, um, and then later Iris in the movie, just so he can have some kind of fulfillment in his life. Um, but his failure, unfortunately, leads to all this destructive behavior. um, so let's talk about some of the best scenes in this movie. So I think the whole "you talking to me" scene. I think that's the one, like everybody knows when he's doing he's practicing in front of the mirror and all this. It's an iconic scene. I remember when WWE did like the WrestleMania 21 in Hollywood, leading up to the pay per view. They were doing all of these different like tributes to movie scenes and stuff, and they did like the Taxi Driver, "You Talking to Me" scene with like with Batista and Rey Mysterio and a few other wrestlers. It was really funny. But yeah, I think that's probably the most iconic scene of this movie that everybody knows. And what's cool about that scene is that a lot of it was improvised by De Niro, and I think it just perfectly, like, shows how Travis is growing paranoia and he's like that instability psychologically. He because he's like he's practicing all this violent persona in front of this mirror. And it just, you know, so I mean that's a key sign of him have losing his mind pretty much. Um and then, I also love all the scenes as when he's traveling through town, and you hear that voiceover from him narrating, his nights on the town and just how disgusted and frustrated he is with uh, what's going on in the city. And then you got to look at the ending of this movie. The climax of this movie is both shocking and unsettling, which it leaves audiences. I think it leaves the audience kind of questioning the the true nature of Travis's actions, and just the lasting consequences. But I love it because he ends up becoming a hero, like in the city. He finally is getting what he wanted, and he's being acknowledged for trying to because he stops this whole prostitution ring, with and he's thanked by Iris's parents, and he's seen as this city hero. And I love how this movie ends. I think I mean, from start to finish, this movie is just fantastic. Um, but Taxi Driver has had a very lasting impact on movies and just pop culture in general. I think it's undeniable to know what kind of impact this movie has had. Um, and Scorsese's direction in this, is is just so uniquely, I think, immersive because like I said, describing everything in the movie from the scenes where you're in the cab going along with Travis to the scene where he's going by, trying to choose what guns to buy. Everything is like as if you're immersed in this world, in the mind of Travis Bickle, and I think that was just it's a very very unique. I think for its time, Scorsese's genius. So yeah, um, but yeah, I mean that I love the movie so much. I mean, I can't say that enough. Even though it's very controversial at times, um, but it's just it's beautiful at the same time. It's beautiful and disgusting at the same time, if that makes sense. Uh, but yeah, I mean, so what do you guys think about Taxi Driver? Let's see what's going on in the chat. See who's here. Greg, thanks for being here, man. You think hope all is well? Yeah, yeah, man. I everything is going good. I mean, like I said, we're still having some hiccups right now with this flood and everything, but other than that, like I said, I'm trying to stay positive, focusing on the channel, focusing on everything else going on in the world around me. So I think all is well right now for sure. Um, and my wife Candace is in here. It has been a really long day. Yeah, it has. Uh, and like I said, I am exhausted right now, but like I feel like um, I have a responsibility to come in here and talk about these movies because talking about movies is still important, and you got to do that too. Um, but let's see. So Kansas, she loves Taxi Driver. So I don't think Taxi Driver could be. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't think it could be made. I mean, it could to an extent, but with some of the content that exists in Taxi Driver, I don't think it would fly in today's society, unfortunately. But who knows? I mean, just maybe somebody's gonna will have the balls to make a movie like Taxi Driver again. So you're up for a trip to New York City? Yeah. Well, me too. We'll have to talk about that. And Greg, you say De Niro plays a great crazy person because he's crazy in real life. I've heard that. I've heard that De Niro is kind of out there. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it makes sense. He's perfectly casted for that. Um, so moving on, the next movie I watched on this week, I watched this week, um, is one of my favorite movies. Of all time, and so it's definitely one of my favorite movies from the '70s. It was released in 1979, and that's The Warriors. Um, the Warriors is a cult classic to me, and it's the visuals in this movie are amazing, um, and I think it really holds up to this day, since it was released back in 1979. Um, it's this stylized, like almost kind of like a mythical journey of survival, and at times it kind of even feels like a comic book, if that makes sense. But it's just this, like I said, this journey of like survival and brotherhood. These guys that are all part of this group that are just dead set on watching each other's back, and then this is another movie from the '70s that uh, where the setting is in New York City, because the Warriors, they're from Coney Island, so they're on their way back home to Coney Island after all these events start happening, and I'll get into that here in just a second. But the director of this movie, Walter Hill, he's just and he was a Walter Hill was a master of just the whole gritty and action driven like filmmaking. Um, and his he has this like style about him with his movies where the dialogue is very minimal, and the visuals in the movie are more of the focus than what the dialogue is. Um, I think it's that whole style is perfectly suited uh, for the story of this movie. He crafts kind of this world that feels like both brutal and strangely beautiful, which is this kind of a distorted reflection of like the whole 70s urban decay or whatever you want to call it. Um, but the movie takes place in this like it's like a dystopian time period of New York City where these all these street gangs are they controlling different turfs of New York, and there's this leader of the Rifts named Cyrus. So he proposes like this truce amongst all the gangs, and just trying to get them to unite all together in this one powerful force so they could potentially, I guess, overthrow the police. Um, and that's something that's very weird about this is like because the police they have a presence in the film, but they're not very present throughout it because it really feels like New York is being taken over by all these different gangs. Um, but anyway, unfortunately, Cyrus is assassinated while he's giving this speech to all the gangs, and the warriors are falsely accused of this crime um, by what's his name? I forget. Oh, by Luther, who's the leader of the Rogues, and he's played by David Patrick Kelly. You may know him as T-Bird from The Crow. But he is the one that actually shoots and kills Cyrus, but the Warriors are blamed for this. So then all these other gangs are hunting down the Warriors at this point, and they got to fight their way back to try to get home back to Coney Island. And they got to go through other enemy territory. Like I said, all these gangs are hunting them at this point, and and it's like I said, it's a fight for survival through this whole like dangerous urban jungle almost. So let's look at some of the characters from the Warriors. And I'm just going to really just focus on there are several members of the Warriors in this, but I'm going to focus on some of the more important ones. Um, so Swan, who is played by Michael Beck, he's the Warriors' like second in command, the war chief, who becomes ends up becoming their leader after the original leader Cleon. Um, I don't know if he got killed. I'm assuming he did, but he just kind of you see him getting beat by the Rifts at the beginning of the movie after Cyrus is killed, but they never made it clear if Cleon died or not. He just kind of disappears. Um, but anyway, Swan, he's very resourceful and he's very protective of the rest of the warriors. So yeah, he's a major and important part of this movie. Then you have Ajax, who's played by James Remar. He's very big hothead, very aggressive. Um, and he's usually like seen like acting without thinking. Um, so this kind of impulsiveness that he has, it often puts the rest of the warriors in danger. Um, then you have Rembrandt. I really like Rembrandt a lot in this. He's feels like he's possibly the youngest member of the Warriors. The guy that played him, I think his name was Marcelino Sanchez or something like that. And he does an excellent job in this. He's just the Warriors graffiti artist and kind of like the documentarian of the group, where he kind of provides this glimpse into the Warriors just internal world and to where they're leaving a mark on the city, and because he's the graffiti artist, get it? But then you have Fox, who is played by the wonderful Thomas G. Waits. And I think Thomas G. Waits nowadays is as a musician, and but he makes a lot of appearances at conventions too, because not only is he in this amazing film, but he's also in one of the greatest films of all time, John Carpenter's The Thing, where he plays Windows. Um, so his character in The Warriors, though, he plays Fox, and um, he's just kind of like a scout for the Warriors, and he's an informant type guy. Um, and he is the one from the Warriors that actually sees Luther killing Cyrus. Um, but unfortunately, Fox does meet a tragic end early on in the movie, uh, in the subway station scene. Um, Then I gotta talk about Mercy. So Mercy was like this chick that they met when they came across the turf of the gang, the Orphans. So I don't know if she was like um, with one of those dudes in the Orphans, or that one guy, the leader, was like her brother, or what it was. But she just kind of up and decides that she's going to join the Warriors on their journey. Um, which and along the way she's kind of challenging their traditional like gang mentality, and she proves herself to them. So I really like her character a lot, and I love the relationship between her and Swan throughout the movie. um and then, like I said, I mentioned Luther. I have to mention Luther. I think he's a very big part of this movie, of of the plot of why all this is happening. He's just this psychopathic leader of the Rogues, and I think his scene at the end when they make it back to Coney Island and the Rogues have followed them there, and the whole scene where he's like in the car and he's got the bottles on his fingers and he's clanking them together. It's like, Warriors, come out to play. I, I love that. I love that. So every time, and I'm an NBA fan as well. So like there's a team called the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry played for them. Very popular team, very successful team. But I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the Warriors team in the NBA. So every time, like one of my teams I'm a Bulls fan, and I'm also a Suns fan. So um, yeah, if for any or I'm a fan of like other teams as well. But so like because the Bulls and the Suns, they they don't really play against each other in because they're from different conferences, but the Suns are in the same conference as the Warriors. So, like I said, every time if a team I like is playing against the Warriors, I always do the Warriors come out to play thing. And that's because that's just that whole scene is with him, and when he says it's burned into my brain. Um, so anyway, like I said, this movie is mainly about survival, and the Warriors struggle to survive against all these overwhelming odds. So they just kind of got to rely on their strength and loyalty to each other to try to make it back home. And the whole bonds of like brotherhood in this between the Warriors characters are really tested throughout the journey because they bicker and they disagree with one another, but ultimately, they remain united, and they support each other to accomplish what they're, what to try to get back home. Um, and speaking of that, the Warriors' loyalty to their gang and to their turf is very like a defining characteristic for all those guys. It drives their actions and motivates them to just to persevere. Um, and the social commentary in this, the movie offers like this bleak portrayal of New York City in the 70s, where it's kind of highlights poverty and crime and just being alienated. a lot like in Taxi Driver. Um, and just the stuff that just plagues these urban communities. I think it comments on just the lack of opportunity and the whole lure, I guess, of luring people into that whole gang life for these young people in that kind of that kind of community. Um, so I mentioned one of the best and one of the most iconic scenes already. Was with at the end with Luther and the whole thing in the car with the bottles. But I definitely got to talk about the Baseball Furies confrontation. So the Baseball Furies are probably my favorite gang in all of the Warriors. Um, so you got these guys just in like the pinstripe, almost like the New York Yankees uniforms. Their faces are painted up in different colors. Um, I think it's very classic example of the film's like stylized violence and just the memorable imagery that comes from this. And that's just and especially with that scene with the Baseball Furies, that is one of the reasons I think it reminds me of a comic book. Um, but it's definitely really cool. And then you got the subway bathroom fight between the Warriors and I guess that gang was like the Roller Boys or something. I know the one guy was like on roller skates. I think that's what they were called, the Roller Boys, but I could be wrong. But it's just a really cool um, it's just a really cool fight within this this subway bathroom. I mean, it's just extreme chaos and just kind of a very tight squeeze, like tight place. Um, and it just I don't know. It's I always that one always kind of stood out to me a lot. I really like that one. Um, but the Warriors, has had a lasting impact, I think, on pop culture as well. Its influence can be seen in like a bunch of other movies and video games, and there was a Warriors video game as well years ago for I think PlayStation 2. And then, also in music videos as well, because I gotta talk about the song that plays as the credits roll as the movie ends, "In the City" by Joe Walsh. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that he wrote that song for this movie, in particular, and it ended up being one of Joe Walsh's best solo songs, outside of his stuff with James Gang and the Eagles and all that. Um and when actually we went and seen Joe Walsh, years ago, it was, Joe Walsh and, Bad Company, uh, somewhere I think in North Carolina was where we went and seen him. But he had this big screen up behind him, that would play different, like, videos and stuff as he would play his songs, and when he played In the City, it showed just all these clips from the Warriors, and I thought that was super cool. I marked the hell out for that, because I love the Warriors. I love Joe Walsh. I think that was a perfect choice for the way that movie ends. I love that song. Um, but the movie's very distinctive, like visual style. It has memorable characters. There's the themes of like survival and brotherhood and loyalty. I think that resonates with a lot of different audiences when they enjoy movies. If you've never seen The Warriors, I highly recommend you check this out as one of your bucket list movies to watch before you die. The Warriors just is awesome. Um, so let's see here. Uh, yeah, great film. You're right, Greg. It is. It's one of the best films that I've ever seen. I love The Warriors. Walter Hill's a great director. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love Walter Hill. I think this has definitely got to be his best movie as well. Um, but I guess moving on, the next movie that I watched this week is one of my favorite '80s revenge films of all time. And this is probably my favorite Linda Blair movie. and that's Savage Streets from 1984. So, like I said, Savage Streets is this action exploitation revenge film that is definitely a product of its time. It's got the neon lights, the synthesizer soundtrack, which I think either 3 or 4 songs came. I think this is from John Farnham, and they had his songs in the movie are the best songs. They're so catchy. I mean, it's definitely like a part of that whole '80s rock, hair metal like thing at the time that was super popular, and I love that shit to this day. I love all that type of music. Love the synthesizer stuff. But this movie's also got really over the top violence and just a lot of things going on in this movie. It's kind of just all wrapped up into this very classic revenge film. I mean, it's not like a cinematic masterpiece or anything, but it's definitely a guilty pleasure for many fans of the genre, including myself. And Danny Steinman directed this. Danny Steinman, who's probably better known for directing Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, which is my favorite Friday the 13th movie of all time. I love it, and I'll be covering them a little bit later this year, all the Friday the 13th movies. So we can talk about that when we get there. But Danny, he brought kind of that similar level of like visuals and exploitation like he did in Friday the 13th Part 5, which uh, in Savage Streets. But you could kind of look at that, flip it the other way around because Savage Streets came out in '84 and New Beginning came out in '85, if I'm not mistaken, or they could have come out the same year. I'm not sure. I can't really remember. But anyway, yeah, I think it's very both of those films kind of the the whole visuals and just things that it was definitely Danny Steinman's style. I got to meet, he's unfortunately passed away now, but I did get to meet Danny Steinman several years ago at a Friday Night Film Fest in Louisville, Kentucky, and he was super cool. I talked to him a lot of different things. I got to take my time with him pretty much because for some reason he wasn't having a lot of people visit him at his table at that convention. I don't know if people just didn't know who he was, didn't realize who he was, or what it was, or if he just wasn't advertised by the convention that well, or I don't know. But it was weird because he was actually set up by my friends over at Dead Pit Radio. His table was right by theirs, and um, you know, I hate to laugh about this because he's passed away now, but because he wasn't getting a lot of traffic to his table, he there was times where he would just like fall asleep at his table and lay his head down on the table, and I was like, "Man, poor guy." I mean, but I'm not gonna lie, I laughed about it at the time, but now thinking back on it, it is kinda sad, especially because he's not here anymore, and just I think he's definitely Danny Steinman is definitely a director that should be recognized, in the whole horror and exploitation genres. Um, but anyway, this movie, let's talk about this movie some. So this movie revolves around Brenda, who's played by Linda Blair, and she's the leader of like this female gang called the Satins, of her and her friends. Well, they're not really like a gang, but they kind of like a gang, and they're still in high school and all that. Um, but Brenda has this deaf and mute younger sister named Heather, who's played by Linnea Quigley. And this is one of Linnea's earliest roles that got her, that got people's eyes on her, because this movie was before she did Return of the Living Dead or Night of the Demons or any of those other awesome movies that she did in the '80s. Um, but, she plays a very different type of character in this too, and I'll get in that in a little bit, but like I said, Brenda and, Heather, they're attacked by this rival gang called the Scars, which is led by this guy named Jake. Um, and Jake, in the beginning, you kind of think like he has a thing for Brenda. She turns him down and everything. They're just giving them problems left and right. So Jake, being this terrible fucking person, they lead Heather into like this bathroom, and him and his gang, well, I mean, I can't really put this lightly, but they rape her, and then she's beaten by Jake and that gang. Um, so Brenda, heartbroken and enraged by this, she decides to take the law into her own hands, pretty much. Um, and it makes things even worse because one of her best friend, who's a part of like her group, is about to be married, and she also finds out that she's pregnant, and her name's Francine, and then Jake and his gang murder her. So Brenda's already, heartbroken and enraged, but this when she and enraged, but and once she finds out that Francine has been murdered, it just makes things even worse. So she just ends up transforming into this whole like one woman vigilante, hunting down these guys and delivering her own, I guess, brand of justice. Um, so yeah, like you got like this is probably like I said, this is probably my favorite Linda Blair movies they're doing. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm not a big fan of The Exorcist. Don't really care for it. I know it's considered, it's widely considered as one of the greatest horror films of all time, but it just has never been for me. I'm not sure why. But I mean, well, I can think of a couple reasons why, but I don't really want to go into that right now. But anyway, but this movie is so different from that. And she's definitely older now than what she was when she was in The Exorcist. Um, she's just, she really plays this really cool character of just being this tough and protective older sister. Um, and then, once you've pissed her off, I mean, all hell breaks loose. And you got the guy Jake, who played by Robert Dreyer. He's just he's the epitome of evil in this movie because, like I said, with Heather, Linnea Quigley's character, who's she's deaf and she's mute, and she has this very sense of just innocence about her, and they take that innocence away from her, and that's definitely not like any other character that I know of that Linnea Quigley has ever played in any movie from the 80s or wherever, because Linnea was always seen as like um the sexual badass, or just or a character like that who was like overly sexual or overly badass. Because if you look, her characters from like Return of the Living Dead or and Now Demons, compared to like sorority babes and the slime ball bolorama. um yeah, I mean, like that's the type of characters that most people know Linnea for. But so this character she plays in Savage Streets is very, very different. But I really like it. I love Linnea. Everything she's in, I mean, I'm a big supporter of her, big fan, always have been, always will be. She's one of the coolest and most down to earth and kindest people that you ever meet at these conventions. So if you've never met Linnea Quigley, I highly suggest that. Um, so this movie, definitely has like the has a vigilante theme to it, to where it just explores the idea of taking the law into your own hands when the system fails, because they've raped and beat her sister. They've murdered her best friend, and there's no police again present in this movie either, and they're not doing anything about these crimes. So the system has failed them, and she just kind of has to take matters in her own hands. Um, so Brenda, her whole transformation highlights that frustration I think felt when justice doesn't seem attainable. But of course, it's just a movie. You got to remember that. So don't go out there just cause like the city you're living in is fucking you over or whatever. Uh, don't go and become a vigilante and kill people or anything. Um, but the bond, I love the bond in this between Brenda and Heather. I think it's one of the most emotional parts of the movie, because Brenda's what she ends up doing. Her actions are kind of driven by her love and her protectiveness of not just because of what happened to her sister, but also her best friend as well. Um, and the loyalty of her other friends, just kind of reinforces this theme as well of the whole sisterhood and loyalty. Um, and just the film also portrays a really bleak, I guess, and violent urban landscape and I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember where this takes place. This one is not in New York City, much like how the Taxi Driver and the Warriors was. But I think this one was like, oh gosh, if somebody knows it, let me know in the chat because I cannot remember now. I remember seeing like when she was in like a Jeep or something or whatever that little vehicle was that she drives in the movie. Like I remember looking at the license plate, but now I can't remember what state they were in. Um, but uh, but yeah, like the 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 whole narrative of this, as far as revenge, being a revenge film, it's pretty straightforward. It's a straightforward revenge tale, as most revenge films are, where something really fucked up happens to somebody that that the main character cares about. So they want to kill all these sons of bitches off one by one. And I mean, that's a very simple but excellent premise to a movie. That's why I love stuff like this and uh, I Spit on Your Grave and Thriller, A Cruel Picture. They call her One Eye. Death Wish, Class of 1984. Um, Maybe I'll do like a whole week of like revenge films at some time for the channel. Because like I said, I do love those types of movies. Um, and the best scenes of this movie, well, I wouldn't call this really one of the best scenes because it's very uncomfortable. But I think it's an important scene to the movie because it's really what is the driving force for the plot. Is the attack on Heather. You know, it's like I said, it's disturbing, but it really pushes the movie to the edge, and the characters like of Brenda to the edge of to to um, acting on on what all these decisions that she's made, what she's going to do to these guys. Um, so w- I love in the end when she starts going after these guys and it's in this warehouse. It's like I don't know if it's like a hardware store or what it is, but she's facing off against these guys and she's just picking them off one by one in this little warehouse. I think it's a lot of it's kind of over the top, but I think they're very creative kills at the same time. But and then the movie at the end after everything's said and done, and they go to visit Francine's grave, and now Heather's okay. Now she's out of the hospital, and uh, they just kind of share this moment all together as friends, and the two sisters, and about how and Brenda says something to the effect of like, we did this for her, and they're like, no, you did this for her because she, like I said, she single handedly just goes and just whips all these guys' asses and just and takes them out. It's awesome. It's a friggin' awesome movie. I think it's a cult classic, and it's definitely remembered for just all these exploitation elements that were popular at the time. And definitely Linda Blair's performance is unforgettable in this. I love her in this. And then you got oh my gosh, what is his name? I always forget it because you know he was in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. John Vernon, I think is his name. You know, he plays the principal in this. He's a little, it's a small part, but like he has that classic line in this. It's always memorable to me as well. It's like where he's having the argument with Jake at the high school, and he he says, "Go fuck an iceberg." Or something like I mean, it's I've never heard anybody else say that sentence ever in another movie I've ever watched. So it's very that's very unique to this movie. Go fucking iceberg. Um, and you know it may not be like I said like the greatest movie ever made or anything, but I think it's a very like fascinating time capsule, I guess, of the eras, like anxieties and just the whole trends going on. Like I talked about with the music and the synthesizers and all that. I mean, I think that's a big part of why I love this movie as well is the music. Um, and I think it's a movie that knows exactly what it is. You know, it's just this gritty, unapologetic, violent, and just entertaining revenge flick. I mean, and like I said, it's very simple, but it's also it works. If it works, don't don't try to fix it. Um, it's a you know also it's so bad at times it's good though, and if you know what I mean, like it's just that type of movie that provides like a guilty pleasure type of entertainment. Because there can be like there's little like cliche and kind of goofy parts within the film, but overall, I mean, I think it's a classic for the 80s. And just, you know, Linda Blair, it's another, you know, I think she'll always be known, of course, for The Exorcist. But I think if, you know, if she's going to be known for anything else besides The Exorcist, it should definitely be this movie or Hell Night or something like that. You know, Linda Blair, I mean, I've never personally met her at conventions. She's been at conventions I've been at. I've kind of like been around her and seen how she's been with other people, and I'm honestly scared because I do want to meet her, uh, because of Savage Streets, but like so many people that I know that has met her at conventions said she's just an absolute bitch, and she's just very not good to be around. And she's always pushing the hell out of her like dog charity rescue thing, whatever it is. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe one day if I say I may, you know what? I'm gonna make it a goal. I'm gonna make it a goal. The next convention that I'm attending, and if she's a guest, I'm gonna try to meet her, and then maybe I could come here on the channel and talk about my experience with that. So that might be fun. Um, but the last thing I just wanted to mention about this, I kind of already talked about this already, I know, but like, I just, you know, really always amazed as many times as I see this. I'm always amazed of how believable Linnea Quigley was in this movie. I mean, it didn't really feel like an over the top type character that she normally plays in movies. It felt like a very real and innocent character that you sympathize with, and that's just very rare for her. And I thought she did such a wonderful job in this. I love Linnea. Um, yeah, so I'm you're never not going to hear me. Um, you know, not putting over Linnea because I mean, like she's just absolutely just awesome, awesome. I love her. But anyway, let's move on now to the next movie that I watched this week, and this would be the movie that I alluded to earlier at the beginning of this stream that I've never seen before. I thought that I had seen this movie for some reason, like years ago, but as I was watching this week, I said, you know, I don't remember ever watching this now. Maybe I was thinking of something else, but This is Robert Harmon's 1986 thriller, The Hitcher, starring C. Thomas Howell and Rutger Hauer. Um, Man, where do I start with this movie? Was fucking awesome. I love this movie. I mean, it's just it show this movie is just explores all these different themes of like vulnerability and manipulation and just people who are truly evil in this world. Um, and this movie was released during the 80s, which was saturated with slasher films like all over the place, left and right. Slasher movies were coming out in the 80s. And um I think that The Hitcher, though, it distinguishes itself uh with this kind of unsettling philosophical like undertone um, that really makes like because you watch like other slashers and stuff in the 80s, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, stuff like that. That kind of feels like, well, that's not going to happen in the real world. That's that stuff that can't happen. But with this movie, The Hitcher, it has a very real feel to it. To to where like, holy shit, that I I'm never going to pick up a hitchhiker as long as I live. I mean, I ain't trying to get killed. And the thing that kind of resonates with me on this is because my great uncle years ago, my great uncle Buster, he picked up a hitchhiker one night as he was coming home from work, and the uh, the guy pulled a knife on him, and he said that that he wanted the vehicle, and if he didn't give it to him, then he was going to kill him. And so what my great uncle Buster did was like, he's like, okay, I'll give it to you. He said, yeah, you just got to ride home with me, um, and I'll get you the title. So the guy like agreed, but he had the knife on him the whole time, and they get there, and he tries to act like he was going to get out of the vehicle to go get the title out of his house, but then but instead came back and lunged at the hitchhiker that he picked up, and he grabbed the blade of the knife, and it cut off like either his thumb or his finger. I can't remember. My mom tells this story a lot better than I do, but but it scared the guy so bad he dropped the knife and he ran off. And I think my mom said they ended up finding him and put him in jail and all that. But I mean, so shit like this really can happen. If you pick up a hitchhiker, if you decide to pick up a hitchhiker, be very careful, be very aware of your surroundings and all that, because but this movie doesn't help that anxiety anymore, because it's just it's insane. And the director of this, Robert Harmon, this was his feature film debut as well. And I think he really uh, knew what he wanted when he made this movie, because it just amplifies suspense out in like the landscapes of like the Midwest, the American Midwest. Like because I think majority of the movie I think is taking place in Texas, but the story is like follows Jim Halsey, who's played by C. Thomas Howell, very young C. Thomas Howell. Um, and this was just a few years after he was in E.T. This is about, I think, like 4 years after he'd done E.T., where he was one of Elliot and Michael's friends. And then around the same time, he'd also done Outsiders and Red Dawn and all that. But he just plays this guy who's transporting this car across the country. So he's trying to get, I think, to San Diego to drop this car off. But so on his journey there, he's going through Texas, and it's raining one night, and then he makes this decision to pick up this guy who's a hitchhiker on the side of the road named John Ryder. And that's the character that Rutger Hauer plays. Um, and After shortly after he picks John Ryder up. Ryder, he confesses to these series of like brutal murders, and then um, psychologically starts trying to torture Jim into and he's trying to just he holds a knife to him and all that, and he's trying to make him say the words "I want to die," and then Jim is just kind of like hesitant to this, and he doesn't want to say those words, and then it's when he notices that the door ajar light is on for the passenger side, and then that's when he kicks Rucker Hauer out the door. But this is just the beginning of all this. I mean, this is right at the beginning of the movie. It's right off the bat. This happens, and then if that was in any other movie, that would be towards the end, and you're thinking, "Oh, well, that's the last of him. That's how it is. That's how he got rid of him." But this is the beginning, and then what follows after this is just John Ryder, kind of haunting Jim Halsey, as he's stalking him at this point, and trying to get back around him any way he can, and to the point, and now he gets to the point to where he has framed Jim for these murders, which the system ends up, isolating Jim in this, and just kind of test his limits, I guess, of sanity. Um, and Jim Halsey in this is this he's just kind of a seemingly ordinary guy, kind of naive, and he's just thrust into this nightmare, and he's another one of these characters that really embodies, I think, innocence, and then that innocence, in the process is lost as he's having to deal with this situation and just trying because he's just trying to survive against this situation that he doesn't even understand fully. Um, and then you got John Ryder, Rucker Hauer is this. He's an evil guy, but he's very charismatic. And I think that's just Rucker Hauer in general and this is probably one of my new favorite roles of Rucker Hauer. My favorite for the longest time has been Hobo with a Shotgun, which love that movie too. I mean, I'll talk about that at some point as well. But Rutger Hauer is just a very charismatic guy, but at the same time, in this type of character he plays here in The Hitcher, it's very terrifying, and he embodies pure evil pretty much, um, and it's just he almost kind of has a sense of humor with how he's torturing Jim because it's like it really gets him going. I don't want to say it like gets him off or anything, but like maybe who knows? Like that's a they didn't really explore that in the movie if that's the case, but yeah. But one character I should mention here too because the two central characters are Jim and John, but then you got Jennifer Jason Leigh, who plays this character Nash. And if you may know Jennifer Jason Leigh, she's also in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And her dad was actually also a big actor, Vic Morrow, who, you know, unfortunately was killed on the set of Twilight Zone, the movie. And I've talked about that a little bit in the past too. Like if you want to go over to Evil Dead Chicks YouTube channel, she does a whole video over Twilight Zone the movie I'm on that stream with her when she did that, and so I kind of give all of my thoughts on that video. But I may talk about that again sometime here on my channel. I don't know. Like I know that's a very difficult and controversial subject of the John Landis's segment in Twilight Zone the movie. But yeah, but anyway, getting off subject. Like I said, yeah, she is the daughter of Vic Morrow, though, and she just plays this waitress who becomes entangled in Jim's ordeal, and she's kind of there to represent this kind of potential connection to humanity and just a sliver of hope for Jim. So um, he's not losing his mind completely. He's got somebody there that has his back. Um, And the Hitcher in general, I think, just dives into the darker aspects of the human psyche, where the whole good versus evil story that's present in so many films throughout history. I think this is a fine example right here. The of Jim representing the good, and John representing the evil, and it really it delves into the nature of both, kind of questioning like the origins of evil, of like the origins of why is John Ryder doing this stuff, and it also kind of showcases the how fragile the innocence can be, and can be taken away in an instant. Um, but you look at the manipulation and control that Ryder presents in this movie as well. Like I think the power he has power in what he's doing, and all the violence that he's committing. But I think ultimately that his power is because he's able to manipulate and kind of control Jim, and just kind of warping his whole reality, and pushing him to the edge. Um, so there is a scene in this, and like I said, this is the first time I've ever watched this movie, so I'm fairly new to it. But there's a scene towards the end which is a scene with Jennifer Jason Leigh's character Nash, and this is a spoiler. Sorry, guys, if you've never seen Hitcher, but there is a dismemberment scene here where John has taken Nash, and he's got her tied between this truck and another like truck or whatever, and so they don't show it. They don't like she does. I guess she gets ripped apart in this because and Jim is trying to save her at this point, but it just like he fails at saving her because she does get ripped apart. But we don't see it in the movie. Now I don't know if there is an uncut scene of this that does show her death. If there is, I would kind of like to see that. If it's available, somebody let me know. Somebody send that to me or something, because or I can maybe just look it up. I don't know why I should have done. I should have at least looked it up before I done this video, so if it is available, I could talk about it. But yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. So anyway, the whole reaction of the police officers who were there. To witnesses, it's very effective. That whole like, and Jeffrey DeMunn, who plays like the sheriff or captain of police or whatever he is in the movie. It shows him he's trying just to console Jim at this point, and they've taken John into custody, and but something in the back of Jim's mind is like, no, I can't allow this. He's got to be stopped, and he knows that even though that John has been captured by the police, that he's going to somehow escape. And um, Jim's instinct was correct, as he does escape from the police, but luckily Jim catches back up to him, and that's where we have the final confrontation of the movie, the showdown between Jim and John, um, to where Jim just annihilates John John Ryder in this scene, and just completely puts, he ends his life. He ends his existence. He is defeated true evil in this world. And I love how this ends, because that's it. Right after he's killed, that's the end of the movie. Like, you don't at least, and I love that it was left open ended. Um, and it just kind of makes you wonder, like, what was the fate of Jim Halsey at this point now? Um, what happened to him beyond this? I mean, was he arrested for how he, what he did to Jeffrey DeMunn's character, leaving him like stranded out on the road, and taking his police cruiser? Um, you don't really know. It's just kind of just left up to you what happened. That was up until like 2003. So I've seen that there is a sequel to this. came out in 2003, the Hitcher 2, and so they do bring back C. Thomas Howell for that and the Jim Halsey character. I know I seen that Jake Busey is like in that one as well as the Hitcher for that one. So I may watch that eventually sometime now that I've seen the first one, but I don't know. I mean, like I, I would it ruin the story though? Like I think that this movie ends perfectly with like you not really knowing what happened to Jim after he's killed John Ryder's character. So I don't know, but maybe I may check it out. I know there's a remake of the Hitchers too, but I don't think it like did very well from what I've heard. Maybe I'll watch that at some point too. I don't know. Um, but I think by just watching this once, I can see that it has influenced, I think, a lot of other films beyond this. Going into the '90s and to the 2000s and all that. I could see it as being very influential, and just it really has a very enduring appeal to it. I think because of the realism of something like this really happened, and then just and that's why I think I maybe connected to it so well because of the story about my great uncle Buster, of something like that happening to him back all those years ago. Um, so yeah, it's I think movies like that are a lot scarier to me when they feel very realistic, like that could actually happen. Um, but in conclusion, I guess The Hitcher, it's a disturbing and very thought-provoking movie that just that lingers on in your mind long after you've watched it. Um, it's got a very chilling atmosphere, uh, awesome performances from everybody involved here in this movie. Um, I think this could be like this could be considered a timeless classic for the horror genre. You know, and I'm sure that after I watch it more and more, um, throughout my life, I think I'm gonna appreciate it even more, um, because it just, like I said, it just feels so real. Like it kind of serves as a almost like a cautionary tale about just the dangers lurking, on the open road, and how fragile that human innocence can be in the face of pure evil. So yeah, awesome movie, a really awesome movie. I love it. Um, but I guess moving on to the next movie that I watched this week is this is a movie I've loved. I've seen this many times. Uh, Probably my favorite Michael Douglas role, um, because it's just about a guy who just says fuck it, and he's going to be play by his own rules now. Um, but that's the 1993 classic Falling Down, which is directed by Joel Schumacher. And I'm a Joel Schumacher fan. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I love the Lost Boys. I loved um, Batman Forever. I thought that was great. I went and watched Batman Forever when I was a kid in theaters, and it was a very different seeing a new because I was used to Michael Keaton at that time. I loved Michael Keaton as Batman and Batman Returns. But seeing Val Kilmer come in as Batman, it was very different. But I love the introduction of Robin finally in Batman Forever, Chris O'Donnell, and just Tommy Lee Jones, Jim Carrey, everybody involved in that movie is fucking great. But that's uh, that's a story for another time. We can talk about Batman Forever at some point here on the channel. Um, but this Falling Down though remains it's another one of those movies where it's very unsettling, and it's just exploring these different like social anxieties of this person who can't take it anymore with just stuff with his job, just the economy frustrating him, and just you know he's got stuff. He's been divorced for his wife, and now she's trying to keep him from seeing his daughter. He's really just like kind of losing his sanity. Um, and I think this is another movie that could kind of be labeled as controversial, especially with the gun shop owner guy and stuff and everything involved in that scene. Um, eh, it, but I think the movie really has this power that lies um, in the ability, I guess, to tap into like to raw, like primal anger, and it really forces viewers to just confront these really uncomfortable truths about how our country is sometimes, and just how society can just break down in an instant. Um, so the movie it follows this guy, William Foster, but we he's only credited as defense thanks to his his license plate, his car at the beginning of the movie. So I can never really like figure out um, if he was still employed or and he was just not happy with his job, or if he was recently unemployed. I'm not sure. I mean, if if it's talked about the film, I always miss it for some reason. But like, I can never really figure out if he's like unemployed or if he's just frustrated with his job. But he works in like this like defense. I guess it's like maybe like the Department of Defense or something. I'm really not sure, but I know it's like but that's why he has that name defense on his license plate. Um, so at the beginning of the movie, he's sitting in traffic on this like really hot summer day, and he's just getting very agitated and fed up with everything. So he attempts to just get out. He just leaves his car, abandons it. Um, and he said, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna go and see my daughter because his daughter's having a birthday party. But at the same time, he's divorced from his wife. She's got a restraining order on him. She don't want him anywhere around her or their daughter. Um, so, like I said, there's all this stuff with him that it pushes him to his breaking point, and where he snaps. Um, and he just starts, going across this Los Angeles. He's journeying across Los Angeles on foot, um, to try to get to his daughter's birthday party. And then, along the journey, he encounters this whole series of just very absurd and disturbing situations that um, and with each encounter, it kind of fuels his rage and more to where like everything is falling down, around him hence the title. Um, but I think the premise with this is very simple. Um, but the execution of everything in it is, I think, a little bit more complex because, it uses Foster's descent into madness through like a lens where you're looking under a microscope to examine these like frustrations of somebody in the working class, and those feelings of being alienated, and just perceiving loss of like of your values. That's what I get from it, at least. And um, but I think another character I should talk about other than, Foster in this is, because there's this whole other side story going on with Detective Martin Prendergast, who's played by Robert Duvall, and he's this veteran LAP detective who's retiring, and he's having his last day um, at work with the police, and he tasks himself with trying to track down, figure out who this guy is that's causing all this chaos around town. What happens is he actually you hear about all these different like kind of crimes that are coming in from across town, or not really crimes, but just like like very weird situations, and he's trying to tie it all together, and he figures out that they're all being handed out by the same guy. Um, and at the same time, Prendergast he kind of is struggling with this whole personal loss, or his daughter was killed, I guess, when she was like 2 years old. So and also his wife, who's kind of like driving him crazy, and she's because she's scared that something's going to happen to her husband. That's why she keeps calling and trying to get him to leave early from work and come home. Um, but I think this kind of his character serves as like a counterpoint to Michael Douglas's character in William Foster, um, to where he kind of like is he represents like the whole order and responsibility within this chaotic stuff that's happening with Foster. Um, so like I said, the movie it explores like that whole feeling of like isolation and stuff with Foster's character and and the whole like disconnect that you know people disconnecting with one another that kind of can plague people into living in this like depression and just and driving themselves insane. Um, and Foster's like his encounters in this movie with like the different shopkeepers and business owners and stuff. It kind of it highlights that whole uh, economic inequality stuff because like if you look at the little shop with the Korean guy to where like um, he gets a Coke and he goes to pay for it, and like the shop owner says it's 85 cents, and this was in 1993. 85 cents for a can of Coke is wild. So if you look at that like compared to stuff that's going on today in society with all these prices going up on stuff, and it just seems very unfair. And we're all as consumers are very frustrated with that. So it's definitely understandable. Maybe not to those extremes as what Foster does in this movie, but I can tell you personally, a lot of this expensive shit nowadays in this world is very, very frustrating for me, who is just is a working class, who I myself am a working class citizen. So yeah, I could definitely kind of feel I can definitely kind of relate in a way. Um, but this movie just to to extend on that, this movie raises questions about the whole impact of distress and society pressuring us into where it's kind of affecting our mental health. And um, I think the whole lack of support um, from people, the other characters in this movie, especially like his ex-wife and all that, um, it, it continues that struggle that he's experiencing. So, sorry if you hear the dogs background. I think someone's at my door. But anyway, this the violence in this, the falling down. It doesn't shy away at all from depicting violence. Um, but I think it also explores different perspectives on what really constitutes justice and uh, how frustrating it can be, for people to where that leads them to extreme actions. Um, but let's talk about some of the best scenes in this movie. Um, so I've kind of described a few scenes already, but I want to talk about like the opening scene kind of kicks this off with with Foster stuck in traffic and he abandons his car, and just all this frustration in the beginning kind of is foreshadowing for the rest of the movie that leads him to this eventual breakdown. And then like I mentioned the convenience store a little bit where he's refusing to pay this inflated price for just a can of Coke, and which ends up culminating in this confrontation with the shopkeeper, um, to where he's just going around, he's just fucking up the store with uh, because he's asking all these prices and they're too high for him. He's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna mess your store up, and he ends up, um, asking about the price again for the Coke, and then the shopkeeper finally agrees, says 50 cents, and he says so, and he pays him. He puts in a dollar, and he takes his change. Oh, that's all right, Ken. She said sorry for the noise, but yeah, it's no big deal. I mean, dogs are gonna be dogs, right? I mean, I'm sure other people out there watching have dogs or other animals as well. So yeah, it is. It's just everyday life for us here at our household. But my favorite scene, like there's definitely humor that's also put into this movie too. Maybe like unintended humor. I don't know. It's either I can't tell if it's intentional or if it's unintentional. But uh, I love the fast food restaurant scene where I think it's called like Whammy Burger or something. It's supposed to be like a generic version of McDonald's, I believe. Um, and so he goes there and he's asking for breakfast and everything, and like it's only like 3 minutes past the cutoff time at 11:30, to where um, he can't get breakfast anymore, and so he starts getting frustrated with them, and there's this arguing back and forth, and then he pulls out a gun and he's holding it up, and then everybody freaks out in the restaurant, and then he accidentally fires, and he doesn't mean to, and he apologizes for firing into the ceiling. So they're just at this point going to do whatever he wants, for him. Um, and I've always thought that this scene kind of inspired the whole late for breakfast scene in Big Daddy, where he's asking for breakfast and then they tell him it's not, um, they're not serving breakfast anymore, and then the kid starts crying and like he starts freaking out. Like, someone get this kid a Happy Meal. But I always felt like that scene in Falling Down kind of inspired that a little bit in Big Daddy. Um, but then eventually he changed his mind, and he decides, "You know what? I think I'm gonna have a burger instead." Um, and then they get him his food, and then he looks at it, and the burger is really flat looking, and he gets upset over that because uh, it kind of goes into the whole like false advertising concept of what happens to a lot of us in the real world where we see something advertised that looks very delicious and it's picture on the menu or whatever, but when we get it, it's not the same. It doesn't look the same, so it's not as appealing. And I think that was kind of like a commentary on that whole situation that a lot of people in society experience. Um, but I talked about this movie being controversial, and I think one of the biggest reasons is the whole army surplus store scene with the whole like gun enthusiast guy who's been listening to all this stuff happening on the police scanner, and he realizes when Foster comes into his store that he is the guy that's been doing it, and he's like, "I'm with you, man. I'm with you." And but it turns out, he takes Foster down to this basement of the store, and this guy ends up being like this huge Nazi racist guy. He has all this like Nazi paraphernalia and stuff and memorabilia, if you want to call it that, all in this basement, and you're like, oh shit. And a lot of that stuff is very controversial, especially some of the dialogue used in that scene as well. Stuff that this movie would not go over well, I don't think, in today's society amongst a lot of people um, that cannot look past the whole, performance art in these movies. That these are just characters. These people are not really that way. Just stuff is really perceived differently now than it was, 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever. Um, but and then you got the ending scene of this over at the Santa Monica Pier, which is the confrontation. Finally, they're meeting for the first time, Foster and Prendergast. And this whole scene involving Foster's ex-wife and their daughter on the pier, and um, you up until this point throughout the movie, when I initially watched this, I was always sympathizing for Foster's character. up until the end of this movie, then no longer am I sympathizing with him. But I'm like, okay, this guy's just he's completely lost it at that point. He just the whole movie he's like just uh descending into madness more and more and more with each situation that he encounters. And then it just finally he loses it. He loses every bit of any kind of, conscious thought, I think, because of what he has come to the conclusion of what he's going to do to his ex-wife and his daughter. Um, but it's that whole scene though at the end, it just kind of um, it forces both the characters of Foster and Prendergast to kind of confront their own personal demons because of just that loss that Prendergast has experienced in the past stuff with his daughter and all that. And he kind of, and then he sees this possibility of this happening to Foster's daughter as well, that she could end up getting killed in this situation. So he just, he's just like, screw retiring. I'm gonna, I'm gonna continue to do this. And so he does. So in the end, Prendergast he doesn't retire. He just continues being a cop because he feels like that he has something left to prove and justifying all of crap like that happens in this world. Um, so falling down, I think it remains to this day is kind of a misinterpreted movie. It's been been praised for its portrayal of like of social anxieties and but it's also been criticized I think for like the whole racist and mis- misogyny. I can't say that word. Um, misogynistic undertones. However, like regardless of whoever's interpreting this film, I think the whole impact of it is undeniable. Um, and the movie has just really sparked a lot of discussions about social justice and the whole economic equality inequality and um, just how violence can just happen in an instant uh, when society is changing. I think we, as in the real world, have seen that a lot in the past, you know, past decade. We've seen a lot of real crazy shit happen in this world. Um, because I think if you don't get a control of that, then we're all going to lose our minds one day. But and I think some people argue about this movie glorifying being a vigilante, but I just think it's more of a cautionary tale about the dangers of having that unchecked anger and just the oh, excuse me and that need for like empathy and understanding, in this really fractured world that we live in. And there's times in this movie that stuff is going to be uncomfortable for some people and unsettling. But I think it's a movie it's one of the best movies I think to come out of the '90s, and it's definitely I think it demands to be seen and discussed by people, especially in today's age. Um, it's very thought provoking and yeah, I think it's one of I think it's one of the most important pieces of film to ever exist. I mean, and yeah, so yeah, if you've never seen Falling Down, I highly suggest watching that one. I think it's one of the greatest movies to ever come out of the 1990s. Um, but that leads me to my last movie that I watched this week, and I'm going to be talking about tonight. And I absolutely loved this movie when I was in high school. I mean, I still like the movie a lot, but I don't feel for it the same like I used to when I was in high school, because when I was in high school, not only did I watch this movie, but after watching the movie, I went and read the book by Chuck Palahniuk, and I was just obsessed with this movie because it was just so different for its time. But as I get older, I still like the movie, but I still feel like it has a very lasting effect on movie history. Um, but I don't like it as much as I used to. And of course, the movie I'm talking about is David Fincher's 1999 movie Fight Club. Um, so Fight Club, it really for its time at the time it came out, it was a cultural like phenomenon. And I think I know a lot of people that love this movie, and they consider it as one of their top favorite movies of all time. But yeah, and I loved it. I loved it. I was obsessed with it in high school. Like I said, I went and read Chuck Palahniuk's book of it. And it's brutal. I mean, it's got comedy in it, um, and it's just really this kind of weird exploration of like modern masculinity and consumerism, and just another one of those movies where they're like searching for this whole meaning in the world that feels meaningless to some people. Um, and David Fincher, I think he's known for his own type of like directing style, where he kind of captures this whole unsettling sense of society. Um, and I think really like this is one of the most perfectly made like translations from a book, because the whole narrative that's being given here it feels like what came from the book as well. Um, and I don't think that they could have got anybody better to portray these roles. Um, but David Fincher, he's known for other stuff like Seven. So I think he did Seven before this one, and so he was already familiar with working with Brad Pitt. Um, and he also did Zodiac and the Social. I think David Fincher, didn't he also do Alien 3? I think that was David Fincher. Some If I'm wrong, somebody correct me on that. Um, but this movie it focuses around this. Well, he doesn't have a name at first. He's just a narrator, which is he's played by Edward Norton, and then but we later learn to know him as Jack. And so that's what I'm going to be referring to him here as Jack. So Jack is just this. He's this lonely, uh, insomniac office worker who's just trapped in a just a soul crushing routine. And I think a lot of people that are office workers, myself included, can kind of relate to that. Um, but it is what it is. It pays the bills. I'm not going to complain too much. But Jack, he's looking for solace, from a bit of a change. By he starts going to these support groups for different various illnesses that he doesn't even have. Like he goes to like one support group, and this is where he meets Meatloaf's character Bob. It's all these guys that have like testicular cancer. And he doesn't have testicular. He doesn't have any of these illnesses. Um, but so this is he's just kind of looking for something, to break this routine of what he has to deal with his job and everyday life. It's just like it's depressing him almost to a point. So um, he eventually meets this guy when coming off of this flight named Tyler Durden, and Tyler Durden is played by Brad Pitt. And Tyler, he's just very charismatic, and kind of has a sense of rebelliousness, and he's a soap salesman, and he's just got like very strange philosophies of life. But together, these guys they start. get to know one another, and they become friends, and they start this whole fight club, which is just this kind of a thing, get together thing they do where these men can just they bring in these guys that are like, everyday regular guys who are just looking to release their this pent up like aggression that they have through having these bare knuckle brawls. Um, and as the Fight Club continues to grow, it eventually it evolves into this whole thing that Tyler creates called Project Mayhem, where they become like this organization that are looking to just dismantle society as we know it and just commit all these crimes and random crimes and stuff. Um, so the story eventually takes this whole dark turn as Jack's life is starting to unravel, and this whole true nature of Tyler Durden is revealed, which it culminates in this really shocking and unforgettable climax of the movie. Um, so, like I said, the Jack and Tyler Durden are the two main characters for this movie, but we also have Marla Singer, which is somebody that Jack meets through the support groups he goes to, because she ends up doing the same thing. Like, she's not there, she doesn't have these illnesses, but she's kind of like there because of the just to be doing something that almost feels humorous to her, but that is ruining the whole experience for Jack. Um, and she ends up getting close to Jack, and she gets close to Jack and Tyler, and she just kind of represents this whole different kind of outsider who eventually embraces the chaos of everything that happens throughout the movie. Um, and the movie kind of highlights like anti-consumerism, I think. So the movie critiques like this whole obsession with material possessions as a means of like achieving happiness and fulfillment in somebody's life. And Tyler Durden says something like, has a line in the movie, says like, the things you own end up owning you. And that's an interesting thing because, like, I'm a big collector of things, from like movies to games, toys, posters, records, a lot of different things I collect. And ultimately I look at it like, sometimes like these are material things. I'm not always going to hold on to these things my whole life, and one day I'm going to be dead and gone, and none of that stuff is going to matter. But it's movies like that that only put that kind of stuff in my mind. I think that's why this movie is so effective, because ultimately, if I think about it, like this stuff that I collect, it does matter. It matters to me because it is what makes me happy. It is what fulfills me. And I think as long as it makes you happy and it fulfills you, that's all that matters. You shouldn't worry about like, if well, what's going to happen to this stuff when I'm dead and gone or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's that's why I think that Fight Club is so impactful, because it makes you think about those sorts of things. Um, and that's just extremely interesting to me. Um, but yeah, some of the best scenes in this movie is like he's when they first form the Fight Club, and because that whole scene gives like this really raw energy of the fights that's been showcased. um and it's the way it's filmed is very gritty and has this realism to it. It's very captivating, I think. But then you got stuff like the when Brad Pitt is delivering this speech, his whole philosophy, like on consumerism and and self destruction. I think that feels like very iconic to this movie, to where that kind of just it it comes across as like the really the core message of the movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Fight Club, I don't want to give too much away from it. I don't want. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I I don't hear a lot of people talk about Fight Club, and that's ironic because that's the first rule of Fight Club is that you don't talk about Fight Club. So maybe people are secretly talking about it to themselves, uh, and that's kind of ironic in a way too. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. Um, but yeah, Fight Club is more than just uh, a movie as well. I think it's very just as a cultural touchstone that kind of continues to be debated and interpreted at times when people are talking about it. Um, it's been praised several times in the past for like the storytelling and the visuals and very just thought provoking stuff like I talked about. Um, and you know, despite there's been a lot of controversy surrounding it, and I think despite the controversy surrounding the movie, um, it had an influence on like filmmaking in general and fashion, and just cultural decisions about masculinity and consumerism and um, it's just I think Fight Club is a very provocative piece of piece of art that really um, it forces people to confront just these uncomfortable truths about themselves and just the world around them. And that was kind of an ongoing theme in a lot of these movies this week. I didn't know these were just six movies that I randomly chose for this show because I thought they were all badass. But um, weirdly enough, they all kind of connected in their own way, and they all kind of had each had similar themes. So that's very interesting that I didn't plan it that way, but it just kind of worked out. Um, and But that's it for these movies this week. This coming week, so the next show I'll be doing, the next show I'll be doing for the 500 movies in 2025 will be this coming Thursday. So that will be part one of the Universal Monsters. So I'm finally getting into the Universal Monster movies. Um, the Universal Monsters are one of my favorite things in this world. Like as far as anything goes, like I love the Universal Monster movies, um, and I'm going to be covering 12 different Universal Monster movies this next week. So on Thursday, I'm going to be covering the first six, and then next Sunday I'll be doing the part two with the other six movies. Um, in both of these streams, I'll be also not just be talking about the movies, but I'm going to show off some of my collection. So I have a ton of Universal Monsters stuff. So I'll be showing some of that stuff off in those streams as well. So I hope to see you guys join me for those this coming week. Like I said at the beginning of this show, um, tomorrow, after WWE Monday Night Raw ends, I will be doing a live stream shortly after that for my new series, Crater Time, where that will be exclusively be about everything pro wrestling, and not just WWE. Like I said, it's going to be AEW, New Japan, old stuff like NWA and Attitude Era, WCW, ECW, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, whatever. Like I said, whatever I want to talk about when it comes to wrestling, whatever's in going turning the wheels in my mind at that time when it comes to professional wrestling. Um, so if you guys are interested in that, please check that out tomorrow night. Like I said, that would be short. That would be beginning shortly after Monday Night Raw tomorrow night. That I'll be doing that. But also, once again, be sure to check out um, the shows that I'm going to be doing this week for the 500 movies in 2025 on the Universal Monsters. And I'm so excited for that. Can't wait to share all that stuff with you guys. Talk about those movies. Just watch those movies again this week. I mean, like I have seen all these movies countless times. Like I said, I'm absolutely infatuated with Universal Monsters. So yeah, so this is going to be a big show for this channel and for me in general. But um, guys, I guess that is it. It's about to turn 11 p.m. here on a Sunday night. Where tomorrow I do have to go back to work. Like I said, it's been an exhausting day, but we've made it again to this day, and I can just say that I'm blessed for that. That I've made it through this day, and I'll be blessed again to wake up tomorrow morning. Um, so I guess that's it for me, guys. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for everybody being that was in the chat tonight. Everybody's watching this live. Everybody that'll be watching this on the replay. Um, please, if you can, like this video. Let people know about this channel. Let them know to come and subscribe. I want to help this channel grow. I want to be able to put a lot of content out there for you guys that knowing that you guys enjoy this. Um, but yeah, like this video, subscribe, click that bell for any kind of future notifications of videos I'm going to be putting out. But guys, I love you and have a good night.